glasses and this headset, but hopefully nothing will fall off. It's been really interesting this morning. I've heard some interesting talks and learned about some Canadian connections that I wasn't aware of. So we'll have to chat later about why you're in Toronto and what you think so far. As I said, I am a trade commissioner. I'm the senior trade commissioner based in Bangalore. I've been in India for about, how long have I been here? About 20 months, I guess. But it's my second term here. I'm a career diplomat, so I move every few years. I did 3 years in Delhi about 12 years ago, 14 years ago. So coming back to India after 14 years, it's been quite an eye-opener, quite a dramatic change in that period of time, as I'm sure you all know. As trade commissioners, I work as part of a team. I'm joined by my colleague Vikram Jain, who's based here in Hyderabad at our trade office. We also have an office in Chennai, as you heard, and we're part of a larger network in India of about 50 professionals who are working to promote trade and investment between Canada and India. And just to clarify, because we always get the question, we work primarily on Canadian exports to India rather than Indian exports to Canada. Indian exports to Canada, that's your government's job, not mine. So if you need help there, that's where you should look. But we do promote investment. We do promote Canadian investment into India, and we promote Indian investment into Canada, and we also promote science and technology cooperation and education. Just a little bit about the Canada-India trade relationship. As I said, I've been here for just a couple of years, but we have seen explosive growth over the past few years. In the past 4 years, our trade with India, bilateral trade, has increased by 30%. We're up now to about $8.5–9 billion a year, which, to put it in perspective, is about the same as Canada does with the US in a given day. So we have a long way to go, a long way to grow. Two-way investment has increased about fivefold in the past few years, and the number of Canadian companies doing business here in India has increased by 50%, many of them now making in India. And many of you probably know the volume of Indian students traveling to Canada for education has actually exploded from about 50,000 to over 200,000 this year. So that's been dramatic. And despite some of the media hype you may have seen around our Prime Minister's visit here last year when Trudeau spent some quality time in India. A lot of good came out of that trip as well. A lot of new relationships and a lot of agreements that we're taking forward. So we've heard a lot about innovation and disruption this morning, and Canada is no stranger to that. I mean, I don't know, maybe most of you are too young to remember Nortel. We're talking about unicorns and decacorns. Nortel was a massive Canadian company. The empty buildings in Ottawa are still there. It went from multi-billion-dollar to zero to bankrupt. Another one, I don't know how many of you recognize this?
BlackBerry.
Hey, good. This was another iconic Canadian company, which was a world leader. Very briefly, the first time I was in India, I carried a BlackBerry that sort of weighed 5 pounds on my hip. They shrunk, and now they've disappeared, unfortunately. We're still using a few of them in the Canadian government, but even the Canadian government, we're phasing them out finally. Not to say that BlackBerry is gone. BlackBerry has evolved and now is focusing primarily on AI, machine learning, and also autonomous vehicles. So it still exists, but not in the form that it once did. So innovation, governments like to talk about innovation. I'm from the government. We like to talk about what the government is doing in innovation. And Canada is doing a lot. I mean, the Canadian government is doing a lot to encourage innovation in Canada. With our government in 2017, they created a strategic innovation fund of $1.5 billion that they're trying to encourage innovation and not only currently, but in the next generation and create innovators. We've also created an initiative called a supercluster initiative, which again, it's about $1 billion that the government is spending on 5 clusters, but a little more sensibly, because these 5 superclusters, rather than being government-led, they're industry-led. So we're letting industry collaborate with academia. The government's providing the funds, and hopefully we'll see some innovations in ocean tech in Halifax, for those of you who know Canada. In AI, there's an AI corridor that runs from Montreal down through Toronto and to Waterloo. Advanced manufacturing, also in the Toronto area. Agriculture in Saskatchewan, and finally a digital technology supercluster that's located in Vancouver. But as important as government programs are and government money is, innovation fundamentally begins with people. And it happens when smart, skilled, and creative people turn their attention to a problem, work hard to deliver an inventive solution. And we like to think that part of the reason that Canada is innovative is because of our diversity. Our engineers and entrepreneurs, men and women, come from all over the world. And each brings a different perspective. And when those diverse ways of seeing thinking come together, they spark creativity. Diversity fosters new ideas generate experimentation needed to make the most of the opportunities that are out there. So diversity in Canada isn't just a social policy, it's also an engine of invention. And it results in creativity that enriches Canada and enriches the world. So in Canada, we have a diverse and creative population, outstanding education and healthcare systems, advanced infrastructure. We also have social stability, financial stability. And again, despite what may be in the papers this week, if you're paying attention to Canadian politics, we also have a stable government willing to invest in the future. So it's no coincidence that many of the lists that you see come out every year in terms of the best place to live, the best place to do business, the best place to raise a family, Canada is at the top or near the top of those lists. So with that in mind, I'd like to talk to you a bit about why you should consider Canada as a location to innovate and to scale up your business. So we heard from Rajiv that he has opened an office in Toronto, so again, I will be interested to hear why. And Raj is still here. Good, Raj, with homegrown, a homegrown enterprise with phenomenal success. But what we'd like to say is that when your phenomenal success is ready to go global, the place that you should consider to take it global is Canada. And the reasons for that are fourfold. The access to markets, access to talent, access to a thriving innovation ecosystem, and access to Canada itself, access to the life in Canada. So I'll go into a little bit about each of those, and then perhaps talk a bit about some of the programs that the Canadian government in conjunction with the Indian government have to promote collaboration between Canada and India. So first, access to markets. I mean, Canada is a trading nation. We're an open nation, open to international trade, and as a result, we've 1 in 5 jobs in Canada is dependent upon international trade. As a result of that, we've had a very forward-looking, a very open and aggressive agenda to sign free trade agreements around the world. We have had a negotiation with India that's been ongoing since 2010, which may get there in the end. But in the interim, we've also signed agreements around the world with over 70%, or countries representing over 70% of global GDP. So we have an FTA with Europe, with the European Union. We have an FTA with the US and Mexico, of course, that was recently renegotiated. We've just signed, and it's just come into force, the the now Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. We also have smaller FTAs with countries in South America, with Israel, etc. But of course, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the largest portion of our trade is with the US, and 85% of the Canadian population lives within 200 or 150 kilometers of the US border, and that remains our primary market, our primary trading relationship, but we're looking, given some of the things that are taking place in the US more recently, we're, like most of the world, looking more broadly for new opportunities. But we won't say any more about that. So the second one was access to talent. And Canadians are among the most skilled and educated people in the world. In Canada, we have the most ethnically diverse workforce in the world. 1 in 5 Canadians speaks one of over 500 languages, or sorry, one of over 200 languages. And they say that in Toronto alone, on any given block, you can speak to people in 150 different languages. We have the highest proportion of the working population with post-secondary education, and we rank number 1 in the world in terms of postdoctoral research among G7 industrial nations. We also have a thriving education, or very successful, very strong universities and research institutes. 3 in the top 50 globally, you've probably heard of them: McGill, UBC, University of Toronto, and 9 Canadian universities find themselves in the top 200 in the world. Just a bit about the ecosystem. So we do believe that Canada is a great place to scale up your business. We have the lowest business costs in the G7, the lowest taxes in the G7, the fewest steps to start a new business, and the least time to take to open a new business. And I wonder if this jives with your experience. We say 1.5 days. How long did it take you? Close enough? Okay, good.